Tonight, as you settle into the quiet stillness of your room, let your thoughts drift far away from the noise and busyness of modern life. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the gentle rhythm of your breath match the calm pace of my words. You are safe, you are at peace, and together, we are about to wander back in time, to a world shrouded in shadows, fog, and the distant tolling of church bells. Our journey tonight takes us to Victorian England, a time of great invention and industry, but also of poverty, hunger, and despair. By day, the streets of London and Manchester bustled with horse-drawn carriages, chimney smoke, and the laughter of well-dressed families. But in the alleyways and hidden corners, children with bare feet huddled for warmth, and men and women carried the heavy burden of hunger. For the poor, for the orphaned, for those with nowhere else to turn, there was one place that stood waiting with cold iron gates: the workhouse. You may have heard whispers of it before, perhaps in a story of Oliver Twist, or in an old history book that described its walls as both a refuge and a prison. But tonight I want you to imagine stepping into it yourself. Tonight we will ask a haunting question. Could you survive the Victorian workhouse? Picture the scene with me now. The year is 1850. A cold mist curls along the cobblestones as dawn breaks over a small English town. The fog is thick, wrapping the street in silence. Somewhere in the distance, a factory bell rings, calling workers to their day of endless labor. And here in the early morning gloom, you see a family. Perhaps it is you, perhaps it is someone you once knew, walking slowly toward a looming building. The workhouse rises like a fortress, its brick walls tall and unwelcoming. The gates stand closed, heavy and dark, as though they guard not safety, but sorrow. You can almost hear the creak of the iron as they open to admit those desperate enough to enter. Behind them, life will change forever. You pause for a moment. Your breath catches in the air. To step forward means to surrender. Your freedom, your possessions, perhaps even your family. But hunger gnaws at your belly. Your shoes are worn thin. The streets no longer offer shelter. And so, with a heavy heart, you cross the threshold. Inside, the world feels different, cold. The echo of footsteps against stone floors fills the halls. A stern master watches, his eyes sharp, his voice clipped as he recites the rules. There will be no idleness here, no laughter, no freedom. Families are divided, men to one wing, women to another, children often sent to their own wards. The very bonds of love are cut apart the moment you enter. It is a strange contradiction. The workhouse was meant as a refuge, a place where no one need starve in the streets. Yet it was also built to be harsh, deliberately so, for the Victorians believed that only by making the workhouse uninviting could they discourage the lazy and idle from seeking help. And so it was shelter, yes, but shelter wrapped in punishment. As you listen, I invite you to imagine yourself in their shoes. Could you bear the endless routine? Could you endure the taste of thin gruel day after day? The same monotonous meals, the same unbending rules. Could you face the shame of being branded a pauper, of losing even the dignity of your own name? Tonight, we will walk together through those halls. We will hear the scrape of spoons against tin bowls, the clang of the morning bell, the sighs of the weary at the end of the day. We will feel the calluses on our hands as we work at endless, grueling tasks, oakum to pick, stones to break, laundry to scrub. And as we move through the long hours of the workhouse, we will pause, reflect, and ask again, could you survive it? This is not just history. It is an experience, a journey into the lives of those who came before us. So, as you lie in your bed, let your imagination open to the past. Let the flickering lamplight and the damp stone walls surround you. Let the chill of the Victorian night brush against your skin. And let my words carry you gently as you drift further and further into this story. But before we begin, I want to invite you to do something for me. If you enjoy these journeys into history, if you find peace and comfort in these bedtime stories, I would love for you to leave a like on this video. It helps more than you can imagine. You can also leave a comment and tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? I always love hearing from you, from every corner of the globe. And now, Let us begin. The gates creak open, the cold air presses in, and your first steps into the Victorian Workhouse echo beneath the high vaulted ceiling. This is where survival begins. The mist hangs heavy over the cobblestone streets, clinging to your clothes like a damp shroud. It is early morning, though the sun barely shows itself through the thick veil of gray. Your breath escapes in little clouds, vanishing into the stillness. Around you, the town stirs quietly awake, shopkeepers lifting shutters, horses snorting as they are harnessed to carts, a distant bell ringing from the parish church. But you are not on your way to the market, nor to a warm home with fires glowing behind its windows. You are walking slowly, hesitantly, toward the looming shape that dominates the far end of the street. Its brick walls rise tall and imposing, without ornament, without kindness. The workhouse. You clutch your thin coat tighter against your body. Your stomach growls, hollow with hunger. Each step feels heavy, as if the very ground knows what awaits and tries to hold you back. Behind you, perhaps, trail your family, your mother, your siblings, a child whose hand you squeeze to reassure, even though you have no reassurance left to give. Ahead, the gates stand black and unwelcoming. The nearer you draw, the colder the air feels. It is not the chill of weather alone, but the stern emptiness that seems to radiate from the walls themselves. This is not a place of comfort. This is a place of discipline, of order, of rules as rigid as iron bars. The gates groan as they open. A porter dressed in plain dark clothes eyes you without warmth. He does not ask your story. He does not need to. For everyone who crosses this threshold has the same tale in the end. Hunger, poverty, desperation. You step forward and the gates close behind you with a sound that lingers in your mind like the closing of a prison door. Inside, the courtyard spreads wide, the stone floor slick with mist. The walls rise higher still, enclosing you, cutting you off from the world outside. You feel suddenly small, insignificant, as though you have stepped into a machine that will grind you down until you are nothing more than a number. A task, a mouth to feed, and a body to work. The first stop is the receiving room. Here the workhouse master waits, a man whose face is carved with years of severity. His eyes scan you with practiced coldness, measuring not who you are, but how much labor you might yield. His voice is clipped, every word stripped of compassion. He reads aloud the rules. You must obey without question. You must work as assigned. You must not speak out of turn. You must attend prayers, keep silence when ordered, and accept the meals provided with no complaint. Punishments will follow disobedience. Rewards are not spoken of, for there are none. Then comes the cruelest moment, separation. Families who arrive together are torn apart. Men are sent one way, women another, children to their own wards. Brothers and sisters who clung to each other on the walk here are pulled apart by the hands of strangers. A mother's tears go unanswered as her child is led away. The sound of crying echoes in the halls, but the rules do not bend. In the workhouse, the bonds of love do not matter. Only order matters. You are given a bundle of clothes. Plain, scratchy, identical to all others. Your own garments, however ragged, are taken away, stripped of even the dignity of individuality. Now you are one of many. A pauper uniform binds you not only in cloth, but in identity. The next step is the washroom. A tin basin, cold water, rough soap. Privacy does not exist here. You bathe beneath the eyes of others, the water biting your skin with its chill. You scrub not for comfort, but because cleanliness is demanded. When you emerge, shivering and damp, you dress in the coarse uniform, its stiff fabric rubbing against your skin. The workhouse bell rings, its metallic clang reverberating through stone corridors. It is time for your first meal. You are led into a long dining hall, where rows of wooden benches stretch beneath high ceilings. The air smells faintly of boiled oats, though not in a way that makes your mouth water. The food is plain, tasteless, measured to the smallest portion. A ladle scrapes across the bottom of a pot, filling your bowl with thin gruel. Beside it, perhaps a crust of bread, hard, stale, enough to quiet the gnawing hunger, but not enough to satisfy it. Around you, the room is silent. Conversation is not permitted. You hear only the scrape of spoons against bowls, the cough of a neighbor, the shuffle of feet on stone floors. The silence is oppressive, pressing down like a weight. You swallow each mouthful slowly, not because it is filling, but because it must last. For there will not be more. After the meal, you are led through narrow corridors to your assigned ward. The men's dormitory is a large, bare hall lined with wooden cots. The women's ward is the same. Children, kept apart, sleep in their own small rooms. Rows of little beds where whispers of fear pass between them before sleep. The air is cold, damp, carrying the faint smell of unwashed clothes and sickness. The bed is hard, the blanket thin. You lie upon it, staring at the ceiling above, listening to the shifting bodies and quiet sighs of those around you. The stone walls seem to close in. The day has been long, though it has barely begun. Tomorrow you will rise at dawn to labor, to scrub, to pick oakum until your fingers bleed. Tonight you must simply endure. As your eyes grow heavy, you wonder how many nights will pass in this place. How many mornings will begin with the clang of that bell, with the taste of gruel, with the ache of separation from those you love. And you wonder quietly to yourself, can I survive this? The candlelight flickers low, the silence deepens, and slowly, against the weight of fear and hunger, sleep comes, fitful, uneasy, but the only refuge the workhouse allows. The first sound you hear is not the chirping of birds, nor the warmth of a morning fire being stoked in a hearth. It is the sharp metallic clang of the workhouse bell. It echoes through stone corridors and across bare dormitories, slicing into the silence of early dawn. Your eyes blink open. The ceiling is gray above you, and the room is filled with the rustle of tired bodies rising. No one speaks. Words are precious here, rationed as carefully as food. A warden's footsteps sound against the floor, heavy, deliberate, making sure all obey. The air is cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible. You pull yourself up from the hard cot, joints stiff, your thin blanket sliding away with little warmth to miss. Around you, others dress quickly, pulling their rough uniforms tighter, fastening what ties they can. The fabric scratches against your skin. A constant reminder that comfort is not part of life here. The bell tolls again. It means only one thing. Hurry. You shuffle into line, following the steady stream of paupers through the long corridor. The stone walls are damp, the windows narrow slits that allow little light. At the hall's end, you enter the chapel. Here the benches are plain, the altar simple, the air filled with the faint scent of wax and dust. The master stands at the front, reading prayers in a voice that is stern rather than soothing. You sit, your body weary, your mind drifting as the words wash over you. Faith is expected here, though not felt by all. For some, the prayers are a comfort, for others, a ritual endured until the day's work begins. When the prayers are finished, the silence deepens once more. You are led into the dining hall. Again, the meal's meager. A bowl of gruel, warm but watery, and a scrap of bread. The scrape of spoons against bowls fills the air. Each person eats quickly, quietly, as though afraid the food might vanish before the last bite. Then comes the division of labor. The master reads aloud assignments. Men are sent to the stone yard to break rocks into smaller pieces with heavy hammers until their arms tremble from exhaustion. Women are sent to the laundry where boiling vats of water and rough soap sting their hands raw. Children are sent to pick oakum, piles of old ship rope, tarred and stiff, torn apart fiber by fiber until little fingers blister and bleed. You hear your name, or perhaps you no longer have a name here. You are simply directed with a gesture, sent to a task chosen not for your skill, but for your body's ability to endure. Today you are given oakum picking. The room is dim, lit by small windows high in the wall. Before you lie heaps of rope, blackened with tar, stiff and unyielding. You sit upon a hard wooden stool, a small pile dragged before you. The task is simple yet endless. Pull apart the fibers with your hands, strip them until they lie in separate strands, ready to be reused for caulking ships. At first it seems manageable, but after minutes, then hours, your fingers ache. The tar clings to your skin, sticky, sharp with a bitter smell that burns your nose. The rope resists cutting into your nails, leaving your fingertips raw. Beside you others work in silence, their heads bowed, their movements mechanical. The only sound is the constant tearing of rope, the occasional cough, the shift of a stool across the floor. Time does not move here. Minutes stretch into hours, each moment indistinguishable from the last. You are not allowed to speak, not allowed to rest, not allowed to think of anything but the rope in front of you. At midday, the bell rings again. You are led to the dining hall where a second meal awaits. It is much like the first, more gruel, perhaps with the faint taste of peas or potatoes. If you are fortunate, a sliver of cheese. If not, the same bowl of gray sustenance that you swallowed in the morning. Your stomach accepts it eagerly, though your mind yearns for more, for flavor, for warmth, for abundance. But the workhouse is not a place of abundance. It is a place of just enough, enough to keep you alive, enough to keep you working. The meal is short. Soon you are back in the oakum room, hands returning to the endless pile. The afternoon drags on, each strand of rope another reminder that your labor is not for yourself, but for the system that owns your hours, your body, your effort. Beyond the walls, the town continues its life. Markets bustle, carriages rattle, children laugh in the streets. But here, in the workhouse, the world is contained, reduced to rope, to silence, to aching hands. The bell rings once more. Evening has arrived. Work ends only when the day itself has been spent. You are led back to the chapel for final prayers. The benches creak beneath weary bodies. Heads bow, though many eyes are closed, not in reverence but in exhaustion. Then to the dining hall again. Supper is served, thin broth, sometimes with a fragment of vegetable, sometimes little more than flavored water. Bread is rationed, portions weighed carefully to ensure no one has more than another. You eat slowly, trying to convince your body that it is satisfied, though your stomach still longs for more. After the meal, you are permitted no leisure, no conversation, no respite beyond returning to the dormitory. The air is colder now. The cot feels no softer than the night before. Around you, coughs echo in the darkness, the muffled sobs of children who miss their mothers, the deep sighs of men who once had trades, homes, families, now reduced to this. You lie back, staring once more at the ceiling. Your fingers are sore, stained with tar, small cuts burning against the thin blanket. The day has been long, yet tomorrow will be the same. The bell will ring, the prayers will drone, the rope will wait. And as sleep drifts toward you, you cannot help but whisper silently in your own mind, "How long can I survive this?" The candlelight fades, the workhouse grows quiet, and another day ends, swallowed into the endless rhythm of labor and silence. The hours crawl by. In the oakum room, the rope seems to multiply. No matter how much you tear, the pile before you never shrinks. The fibers cling to your skin, leaving splinters that sting beneath your nails. Your back begins to ache from the endless stooping, your shoulders stiff from the strain. Beside you sits a child, no more than 8 years old. His small hands struggle against the rope, fingers red and raw. Every so often he pauses, rubbing his eyes, weary beyond his years. A matron's sharp glance sends him back to work. No words needed. The silence here is an iron rule. Speak, and you risk punishment. Work, and at least you are left in peace. The air grows heavy, thick with the smell of tar. It clings to your throat, leaving a bitter taste on your tongue. A cough breaks out at the far end of the room, a hacking sound that echoes against the walls. No one looks up. no one dares. The bell has not yet rung, but you feel time's weight pressing down. Your body aches, your mind drifts. You wonder how many hours remain until freedom, even the small freedom of returning to your cot. At last a guard enters. The day has passed far enough for a change, but not rest, never rest. You are moved to another task, your hands guided not by choice, but by order. Today, it is the stone yard. You are handed a hammer, heavy and rough. Before you lies a pile of rocks, large and unyielding. Your duty is to break them into smaller pieces, nothing more, nothing less. Each swing resounds against the stone, a dull thud followed by the crack of splitting rock. The work is punishing. Your arms grow tired quickly, the hammer clumsy in your grip. Sweat prickles at your brow, though the air is cold. Around you, men strike again and again, their movements slow, mechanical, beaten into rhythm by years of repetition. There is no purpose to the stones. They will not be used to build, nor to pave, nor to craft. They are broken only for the sake of breaking, labor without meaning, punishment dressed as occupation. As the hours drag, your hands blister. The skin along your palm rubs raw against the handle. The sound of stone shattering fills your ears until it becomes a kind of endless hum, louder even than your own thoughts. When you falter, the guard's eyes are upon you. Not a word is spoken, but the message is clear. Continue. Always continue. At last, the midday bell rings again. The clang echoes across the workhouse, signaling the one small mercy of the day, food. You return to the dining hall. The benches scrape against the floor as weary bodies take their place. A bowl is handed to you. The gruel looks no different from the morning's portion. Perhaps it is thicker, perhaps not. Hunger leaves no room for questions. You eat quickly, spoons scraping against the bottom of the bowl, your stomach aching for more. Across the table, faces are blank, eyes lowered. Conversation is forbidden, but even if it were allowed, what would there be to say? The hunger is the same, the weariness the same, the unending labor the same. When the bowls are collected, the bell sounds once more. Work calls you back. This time it is the laundry. The room is stifling. Huge vats of boiling water fill the air with steam, rising in clouds that cling to your skin. The smell of soap stings your nose. You are given a pile of linen, heavy and stiff with dirt. Your hands plunge into the scalding water, scrubbing, wringing, beating the cloth against the boards until your arms tremble. The water burns, leaving your fingers red and raw. Soap bites into the cuts already made by rope and stone. You grit your teeth, saying nothing. Around you, women work in silence. Some are bent with age, their bodies thin and fragile. Others are younger, though their faces bear lines etched by hardship. Their hands move quickly, almost frantically, as though to keep pace with time itself. The hours here are different. The heat makes minutes blur, steam wrapping the room in a haze. Your body longs for air, for rest, but the piles of linen never diminish. Each time one stack is finished, another is brought. By the time the bell rings for evening prayers, your arms are heavy, your fingers trembling from exhaustion. Once again, you are led to the chapel. The prayers are the same as the morning, the Master's voice steady, unyielding. You bow your head, not in reverence, but in surrender. The words drift over you meaningless, a ritual repeated so often it has lost its soul. Then comes supper. The bowl before you holds thin broth, a shadow of a meal. It warms your stomach, but the hunger remains. Bread is rationed, a small slice placed carefully before you. You eat slowly, stretching each bite, though it disappears too quickly. After the meal, you are given no freedom. The workhouse is not a place for laughter, nor for joy, nor for rest beyond what is necessary. Instead, you are herded back to the dormitory, rows of cots waiting in the cold. You lie down once more, body aching, mind clouded with fatigue. Around you, the sounds of the workhouse fill the night. The coughs of the sick, the restless shifting of tired bodies, the distant clang of iron doors closing. Sleep comes slowly, dragging you into its depths. And as your eyes close, one thought lingers. Tomorrow will be the same. The bell will ring, the prayers will drone, the work will break you, piece by piece. And yet, somehow, you will rise again. The workhouse is a machine. From the outside, its walls are plain, almost faceless, designed to erase the individual, to reduce every man, woman, and child into nothing more than a number. A task, a bed in a row. But behind those walls, whispers survive. And if you listen closely, you'll find that each quiet figure bent over their labor hides a story, one that the workhouse would rather you never hear. Tonight, you will hear them. The boy beside you in the oakum room, the one with the raw, bleeding hands, he was not born to hardship. Once he ran in meadows, laughing, free. His father, a carpenter, fell ill one bitter winter, and with no wages, the family found themselves at the master's door. The boy's laughter has been silent ever since. He works not for play, but for survival, his childhood stripped away by rules written in ledgers. Across the laundry, an old woman scrubs linen with hands twisted by age. She once kept a small shop, selling ribbons and lace. A widow left to fend alone, she could not keep up with rent. Neighbors whispered that she was unlucky, cursed, perhaps even foolish. But the truth was simpler. She grew old in a world that had no mercy for the weak. The workhouse became her last shelter, though it feels more like a prison. And then in the dormitory, there is a man who rarely speaks. His eyes are sharp, always watching, though his body seems broken. Few know his story, but once he served in the army. He fought in far-off lands under the Union Jack, carried musket and powder, and bled for king and country. When he returned, there was no welcome, no pension, no home. The workhouse walls swallowed him whole, his service forgotten, his pride buried beneath stone-breaking and soup lines. Each face here holds a tale like this. Tales of illness, of poverty, of betrayal. Stories that would shake the heart if only the world would listen. But the workhouse does not care for stories. It cares only for silence, obedience, and labor. It is a place designed to strip away identity until all you are is hungry hands and weary feet. And yet, listen closely enough, and you will find resistance. Not open rebellion, for that would be crushed, but small acts of defiance, hidden in the quiet. A crust of bread secretly shared, a hymn whispered after lights out, a glance exchanged across the chapel that says, I see you, you are still human. These stories are the heartbeat of the workhouse, the part that survives despite everything. But even here, where survival is measured in crumbs and minutes of rest, rumors stir, rumors of escape, of punishment, of death. And as you lie in your cot tonight, drifting toward uneasy sleep, you can't help but wonder, whose story will end tomorrow? The workhouse is a machine. Its walls are high, its windows narrow, its corridors long and unyielding. To the casual visitor, it seems like a place of order, of neatness, of control. But to those inside, it is something else entirely, a living beast that consumes dignity, hope, and time, one day at a time. You hear it in the shuffle of boots on stone, in the clang of tin bowls on wooden tables, in the creak of the master's office door, opening and closing with decisions that shape the lives of those under its roof. But what the world outside does not see, what the ledgers and reports do not write down, are the stories hidden inside these walls. Tonight, you will hear them. In the oakum room, where strands of old rope must be picked apart for hours upon hours, sits a boy no more than 9. His name is Thomas, though no one calls him that anymore. Here he is just boy 47. His hands are blistered, the skin raw where the tar from the rope bites into him. Sometimes he winces, sometimes he cries, but always he keeps working. Not long ago, Thomas's life was different. He had a small wooden toy horse carved by his father and a mother who sang to him as she scrubbed clothes by the river. But then came the sickness. His father's cough deepened until it hollowed him out, and when the burial fees were too much, the family could not hold on to their cottage. The parish officers came, spoke kindly at first, then firmly, and soon the family was marched to the workhouse gate. The toy horse was left behind. His mother was placed in the women's wing. Thomas was sent here to sit in silence, tugging apart rope that feels like it cuts deeper into his heart with each strand. At night, he dreams of the meadow where he once ran free. But every morning the bell wakes him, and the dream fades into rope, tar, and pain. Across the yard, in the steaming laundry room, you find Mary bent over a tub. Her back is curved like a bow, her hands swollen and red. The air is damp with soap and sweat, and yet she works without complaint. Once Mary kept a little ribbon shop. She knew her customers by name, and her shelves glowed with bright colors, scarlet, gold, and soft pastels. She was proud of her independence, proud of her little shop that smelled of lavender and lace. But when her husband passed, debts mounted, rent collectors came. One by one, her ribbons disappeared, sold to keep herself afloat. The day came when there was nothing left to sell. Her neighbors pitied her. Some whispered cruelly that she had been foolish not to remarry. But Mary only had her memories. Now those memories are all that sustain her as she scrubs the endless sheets of strangers. Her own story drowned out by the hiss of boiling water and the slap of wet cloth. Sometimes as she works, she closes her eyes and imagines tying a ribbon in a child's hair again, a small defiance against the dull gray of the workhouse. And then there is William, the man in the dormitory who rarely speaks. He sits straight even in his thin cot, as though his body remembers the drills of the army long after his spirit is tired. His beard is unkempt, his uniform long since replaced with coarse workhouse cloth. Few know his past, but William once stood proudly in scarlet coat and musket. He fought in battles across the seas, carried his nation's flag into smoke and fire. He lost comrades, endured hunger, and lived with the promise that service would mean security. But when he returned home, there was no reward, no pension, no place for him. The government that had once needed him had no use for him now. His family, unable to support another mouth, sent him here. Sometimes, late at night, he hums an old marching song, so softly that only those in the next cot can hear. It is his way of reminding himself that once he had a purpose, even if the world is forgotten. The workhouse is built to crush spirit, but spirit has a way of surviving in the smallest cracks. At meal times, when the watery soup is ladled out, some inmates manage to save a scrap of bread to share with someone weaker. In the laundry, a hymn slips through the steam, whispered in harmony, too quiet for the matron to punish. In the dormitory, two children exchange a glance, a secret smile, a reminder that they are still more than numbers. These are not rebellions that topple walls. They are rebellions of the soul, tiny sparks of defiance against the machine. And though the master believes he has stamped out individuality, the truth is that humanity lingers in every whispered word, in stolen crumb. But where there are whispers of kindness, there are also darker whispers. Some say a boy once tried to escape, climbing the outer wall in the dead of night. He was caught before dawn and flogged until his back bled. No one saw him after that. Others speak of deaths, of men who collapsed under the strain of stone breaking, their bodies carried out quietly before the others could see. And then there are the stories of madness, of women driven to muttering and rocking in their beds, their minds unraveling from the endless silence and discipline. The workhouse does not write these stories in its ledgers, but they live on, carried in whispers, in glances, in the hushed voice of the man at your side who dares to say, "Do you hear what happened to him?" As you lie in your own cot tonight, your mind drifts. You wonder which story might have been yours had you been born into this time. Would you have been the child forced from play to punishment? The shopkeeper, stripped of livelihood? The soldier, discarded by the country he bled for? Or perhaps, in the flicker of candlelight, you wonder if you would have been the whisperer, the one who shared bread, who hummed a tune, who clung to small acts of resistance against the crushing weight of the workhouse. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize that the workhouse was not only a building of stone and labor, but a mirror held up to society itself. A mirror reflecting how a world treats its weakest. It's sick. It's forgotten. The night deepens within the workhouse. The air is heavy, tinged with the faint smell of boiled cabbage that lingers long after supper, mingling with soap, sweat, and damp wool. The dormitories are quiet now, at least on the surface. But within this stillness, dozens of hearts beat, dozens of minds wander, and dozens of hidden stories unfold like fragile threads in the dark. Tonight, let us walk slowly through those threads, one by one. In the corner of the girls' ward lies Eliza, no older than 15. By day, she works in the laundry, her fingers raw from wringing water out of coarse sheets. By night, she curls against the thin mattress and whispers to herself the patterns of weaving her mother once taught her. Her mother had been a weaver, proud and skilled. She worked the loom in the light of their cottage window, making cloth that glowed with color. But machines came faster, cheaper, merciless. The family's trade collapsed, the loom was sold, and the parish men escorted them here. Now, in the silence of the workhouse, Eliza recreates the patterns in her mind, threads crossing, colors blending, cloth coming to life. She cannot weave with her hands, but she weaves with memory. It comforts her, reminding her that she was once more than a number on the workhouse roll. Not far away sleeps Joseph, a man with shoulders like iron. His arms still carry the strength of a blacksmith, though the hammer has long since been taken from him. He remembers the ringing of metal, the glow of fire, the sparks that leapt like stars when his hammer struck the anvil. Now, instead of crafting tools and horseshoes, Joseph breaks stones in the yard. Each swing of the hammer feels empty. No creation, no purpose, only destruction. The master says it builds discipline. Joseph knows it builds despair. But Joseph refuses to bow completely. In the evenings when no one is watching, he sharpens tiny scraps of stone into shapes. Little birds, a rough heart, a cross. He hides them under his mattress, small acts of rebellion, proof that his hands can still create. Someday, perhaps, someone will find them and know that even here, artistry lived. In the kitchen where watery broth simmers and bread is rationed with strict measure works Sarah. She is 16, nimble and quick, chosen to ladle soup for the dormitories. She does not complain, though the smell of boiling cabbage clings to her hair, and the matron's eyes follow her every move. But Sarah has a secret. She has learned how to slip crumbs of bread into her apron pocket. Not for herself, though she is often hungry, but for a younger boy she passes in the corridor each night. He never speaks, only nods gratefully when she presses the crumb into his hand. It is dangerous. If caught, she would be punished, perhaps denied food herself. Yet she continues. For Sarah, those crumbs are more than bread. They are a thread of hope, a reminder that kindness still has a place even within these walls. There is a corner in the men's ward where whispers gather. It is a place hidden from the master's direct view, where old men exchange fragments of stories. Some speak of farms they once worked, of sons they left behind, of wives they hope are still alive somewhere beyond the walls. Others tell darker tales, of inmates who vanished after punishment, of guards who took pleasure in cruelty, of rules bent to breaking point. The whispers are not loud, not daring. They are soft, meant only for tired ears. But they carry something powerful, connection. For in the workhouse where silence is enforced, the mere act of whispering becomes a rebellion. And yet not all who dwell here are entirely heartless. The matron, Miss Green, is stern, sharp-voiced, and feared. She enforces the rules with precision. Work must be done, silence kept, discipline maintained. But sometimes when she thinks no one is watching, her eyes soften. It is said she once lost a child, that she came to the workhouse not out of cruelty, but because it gave her shelter too. Once a child too weak to lift her bowl fainted at the dining table. Miss Green carried her to bed herself, though she scolded others for staring. Another time, she quietly slipped an extra ladle of broth into an old man's bowl when she thought no one would notice. The workhouse forces its staff into roles as rigid as the inmates. Yet within Miss Green's shadow lies a reminder that even among enforcers, humanity flickers. Days inside the workhouse do not pass like they do outside. There are no seasons here, only routine. Bells ring, meals are served, work is assigned, prayers are said, lights are extinguished. To the inmates, weeks blur into months, months into years. Some grow old here, their hair whitening beneath the same gray roof. Some die here, their graves unmarked in the parish ground. And yet within this monotony, memory lingers. Each inmate carries a piece of the outside world, a song, a craft, a story that cannot quite be erased. They replay them in their minds, over and over, like secret treasures. As you listen now, it feels as though you are walking quietly among them. You hear the cough of the soldier, the sigh of the laundress, the murmur of the whispering corner. You feel the rough texture of the stone walls beneath your fingers, smell the faint sting of soap and tar. You realize that what survives here is not only suffering, but resilience. It is quiet, often hidden, but it is real. These people were not meant to be remembered. The system sought to make them invisible. Yet here, in the stillness, their stories rise again, fragile, haunting, unforgettable. The dormitory grows quieter now. The whispers fade, the coughs soften, the last cough of a coal fire dies out. You hear only the creak of beds as tired bodies shift, the hush of breath filling the night. And slowly you too feel yourself sinking into their rhythm. Your breathing slows, your eyes grow heavy. You drift, not into despair, but into a space of remembrance, carrying their voices with you as you slip into sleep. The workhouse was not just a place to live. It was a machine. Every cog, every bolt, every rule worked together to grind the spirit down and enforce obedience. From the moment you stepped inside, your life ceased to belong to you. It belonged to the regulations. It began each day with the bell. At dawn, while the world outside still slumbered in cottages and streets, the harsh clang echoed through the wards. It was not a gentle bell, not a church chime. It was sharp, metallic, a demand rather than a call. Children startled awake. Old men groaned, rubbing stiff joints. Women pulled rough shawls tighter against their thin nightdresses. The bell meant one thing: rise. And with rising came obedience. Inside the workhouse, silence was not simply encouraged, it was enforced. At meals, inmates ate without speaking. At work, they labored with only the scrape of tools or the splash of laundry breaking the stillness. Even in the dormitories, voices were hushed, whispers punished. It was said that silence served discipline. That chatter bred disobedience, and disobedience led to chaos. But in truth, silence bred something else: isolation. Without words, families could not comfort one another. Friends could not confide. Even prayers, if too loud, might draw the master's disapproving gaze. And so silence became its own language. A nod here, a look there, a crumb passed from one hand to another. The quiet was heavy, almost alive. It pressed upon the chest like a weight, suffocating, relentless. Even the closest bonds were severed by the rules. Husbands and wives were divided at the gate, sent to different wards. Parents and children were separated, boys with boys, girls with girls, infants placed in the nursery. A father might glimpse his child across the yard once a week, but he could not embrace them. It was deliberate. The poor law architects believed affection made people weak, made them less obedient. Love, they thought, distracted from duty. And so families were torn apart, made strangers under the same roof. Some never saw one another again. A child might be apprenticed away, a husband transferred to another house, a wife buried before reunion. The workhouse was not merely a prison of walls, but of absence. The rules were not abstract, they carried sharp edges. A child who whispered at meals might be denied food. A man who shirked work might be locked in the stone cells. A woman caught stealing scraps could be branded a thief before the entire ward. The stone cells were the harshest of all. Small, airless rooms with bare floors and iron doors, where prisoners sat in cold silence for hours, sometimes days. No bed, no fire, only shadows and time. Some came out shivering, humbled, others came out broken. The masters claimed it was discipline, but those who lived it knew it was closer to cruelty. Not all punishments were physical. Sometimes they took away privileges so small, yet so vital, that they felt like crushing blows. A warm coal from the fire withheld, a holiday service denied, a letter from outside intercepted and never delivered. Other times, punishment came as humiliation. Inmates might be lined up, scolded before all, their shame paraded like a warning. A mistake became not just an error, but a spectacle. These punishments left no scar on the body, but they carved deep wounds in the soul. At the heart of the rules stood the overseer. Each workhouse had one, a figure of stern authority whose presence filled every corner. Some were merely bureaucrats, keeping tally of labor and rations. Others took pleasure in their power, their voices sharp as whips, their eyes unblinking. To the inmates, the overseer was less a man than a shadow, always watching, always judging, always waiting for the smallest breach. Children feared his boots echoing in the corridor. Mothers straightened at the sight of his cane. Men worked faster when his shadow fell across the yard. He was not God, but within these walls, he might as well have been. Fear became the rhythm of life. The bell struck fear. The silence whispered fear. The separations carved fear. The punishments sealed fear. And the overseer embodied it. This rhythm beat endlessly, day after day, until fear itself became normal, until inmates no longer questioned, no longer resisted, no longer remembered what freedom felt like. And yet, even here, not all bowed entirely. A stolen crumb, a smuggled song, a secret smile shared across the dining hall. The rules were iron, but iron can bend, however slightly, under pressure. Each small act of defiance was a reminder. They were still human, still capable of choice, however small. The masters could command silence, but they could not command thought. They could separate families, but they could not erase love. They could punish bodies, but they could not kill hope entirely. And so the rules, though rigid, were never absolute. Within their cracks, humanity endured. Now, as you imagine walking the long corridors of the workhouse, you hear the faint clang of the bell, the shuffling of feet, the hush of silence. You see men and women bent over their work, children clutching their bowls, overseers striding past with dark gazes. You feel the weight of discipline pressing against your chest, heavy but rhythmic, like a lullaby, harsh yet steady. And slowly, with that rhythm echoing in your ears, your breath softens. Your eyes grow heavy. You drift, not into punishment, but into rest, carried by the ghostly cadence of the workhouse rules. The workhouse was a world bound by rules. Yet rules alone were not enough to make people obey. They needed something more powerful. They needed fear, habit, and the constant erosion of the will. And so, every part of life inside these walls was crafted not merely to control the body, but to shape the mind. Even the buildings themselves were designed to enforce obedience. The long corridors stretched like rivers of stone, their walls bare, their windows high and narrow. Light trickled in, but never enough to warm the air. Doors were heavy, iron-studded, groaning when opened, clanging when shut. Every sound carried, the cough of a child, the creak of boots, the scrape of a wooden chair. There was no privacy, no corner in which to hide. The architecture reminded you, with every step, that you were not free. The dormitories were arranged in rows, beds lined like soldiers, blankets thin and gray. To one side, the master's small chamber overlooked the ward, a reminder that even in sleep, the inmates were under surveillance. The yards were enclosed by high walls, sharp with frost in winter, glaring with heat in summer. Even the open air was a cage. The rhythm of life was measured not by personal choice, but by the relentless ticking of the workhouse clock. At dawn, the bell rang for rising. At 6, prayers were recited in unison. At 7, breakfast was taken in silence. At 8, work began. At 12, the midday meal, thin and hurried, was consumed. At 1, labor resumed. At 6, supper was given. And at 9, the day ended in the cold embrace of the dormitory. This clock left no room for individuality. The man who once rose late to read by the fire, the woman who once sang as she cooked, the child who once played until dusk, all these rhythms vanished. They were replaced by the clock's tyranny. Life was no longer lived, it was endured. Every action, every loaf of bread, every ounce of coal was accounted for in the overseer's ledger. A name written in ink, a mark beside it. A note of rations taken, of work completed, of infractions made. To the overseer, the inmates were not people, but numbers. A man was not John Smith, who once plowed fields in the countryside, who loved his wife and read aloud to his children. No, he was simply inmate #12, rations consumed, daily bread, daily broth, daily gruel. This stripping of identity was as sharp as any lash. To be reduced to ink on a page was to vanish slowly, to dissolve into bureaucracy. The punishment cells were feared by all, small, windowless, with walls damp and rough. They swallowed sound. Inside, the silence was not the calm of rest, but the silence of emptiness. Hours passed like days. A candle flame seemed brighter than the sun. The scrape of rats in the walls was the only company. Some prisoners emerged from the stone cells with hollow eyes, their hands trembling as if they had aged years in only a few nights. Yet sometimes punishment had the opposite effect. A man who had endured 3 nights in the cell might emerge defiant, his spirit hardened like steel. For once you had lived through the worst silence. What else could they take from you? The harshness of discipline weighed heaviest on the children. They were taught from their first moments in the workhouse that obedience was survival. A boy who fidgeted during prayers might have his meager portion of bread withheld. A girl who failed to keep pace with her stitching might be struck across the knuckles with a ruler. Even play was regulated. At rare times when children were allowed in the yard, their games were watched closely. No running too wild, no shouts too loud, no laughter that might disturb the order. The children learned to carry themselves not like children, but like miniature adults. Their backs straight, their voices soft, their faces solemn. The workhouse did not simply raise them, it reshaped them. But rules could never stamp out the sparks of resistance entirely. A boy might sneak an extra crust of bread from the kitchen, slipping it into the palm of a hungry friend. A woman might hum a hymn beneath her breath while scrubbing the laundry, her tune so soft that it seemed like the murmur of water. A man might carve initials into the wooden bed frame, a secret mark that declared, "I was here, I lived, I resisted." These acts were small, almost invisible, yet they mattered. They were the thin threads of humanity woven through the iron fabric of discipline. For all their authority, the overseers could not be everywhere. There were moments when shadows stretched across the ward, and their boots no longer echoed in the halls. Moments when the bell was silent, the clock unheeded, and the watchful eyes looked elsewhere. In those fragile pauses, the rules loosened. Children dared to whisper. Old men exchanged quiet tales of life beyond the walls. Women allowed themselves a fleeting smile, a shared glance of solidarity. The workhouse wanted to make its inmates invisible, but in the overseer's blind spots, their humanity flickered, alive and undeniable. The rules were harsh, but they were not mindless. They were crafted with intent. By breaking families, the workhouse broke bonds of loyalty that might foster rebellion. By enforcing silence, it suppressed the spread of ideas and plans. By punishing small infractions, it taught inmates that resistance was never worth the cost. It was a science of control, a system as precise as clockwork, each cog designed to wear down the spirit until obedience seemed natural. But the masters forgot one thing. Even the finest clock eventually rusts. Even the strongest gears slip. And within the cracks, life returns. As night fell, the rules softened, not in mercy, but in rhythm. The bell ceased its tolling. The overseer's boots no longer echoed. The long corridors grew quiet. The iron discipline gave way to a different kind of silence, one heavy with sleep. Children curled beneath thin blankets. Men and women lay still on their narrow beds. The rules did not vanish, but they drifted into dreams, carried into the night like shadows. And so, as you imagine yourself lying there, beneath the gaze of stone walls, in the weight of silence, you feel your own breathing slow. The rules no longer bite, they no longer punish. They simply hum, steady and distant, like the ticking of a faraway clock. And with that rhythm, you too drift gently into sleep. The workhouse was more than stone walls and iron rules. It was also an endless negotiation with hunger. For within these walls, food was not simply nourishment. It was control. It was currency. It was survival. At dawn, when the bell rang and prayers were murmured through dry lips, the first meal awaited. A basin of gruel, thin, gray, steaming faintly. A porridge of oats or barley, stretched with water until it barely clung to the spoon. Sometimes, if fortune smiled, a crust of bread was given with it, hard, coarse, its edges sharp against the teeth. For children, that bread felt like treasure. They tucked it away in their pockets, nibbling slowly throughout the day, making it last as long as possible. There was no milk, no butter, no sugar, just the bland taste of survival. And yet, to the hollow stomachs of the inmates, it was something. Meals were never a time of joy. In the dining hall, men sat on one side, women on the other. Children, separated still further, ate together, small and wide-eyed, their bowls before them. Talking was forbidden. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons, the crack of crust breaking, and the occasional cough. To lift your eyes too long, to whisper, even to smile at another, was to risk punishment. So they ate in silence, heads bowed, as if food were not a gift, but a test. The gruel bowl was the most familiar sight in the workhouse. Some bowls were chipped, their rims jagged. Others bore faint stains that never quite washed out. Each inmate had one, carried like a small possession, the only item truly theirs. And yet the contents of that bowl never varied. Thin broth, porridge, perhaps a sliver of vegetable if the pot was kind. It was said, half in jest and half in despair, that one could live a lifetime in the workhouse and never see a piece of meat larger than a thumb. For the masters believed hunger kept people humble. But once a week on Sundays, there was change. On that day, after prayers and sermons, the kitchen stirred with greater purpose. A pot of broth richer than usual. Perhaps a shred of salt pork. A potato, a carrot, something with substance. It was still meager, but compared to the week's thin rations, it felt almost like a feast. Men savored every bite. Women closed their eyes as they swallowed, pretending just for a moment that it was a meal from their own kitchens before poverty had carried them here. Children licked their spoons clean, their bellies momentarily warmed. It was not enough to nourish, but it was enough to remind them of what they had lost. Food was not only scarce, it was weaponized. A child who spoke out of turn might find their bread withheld. A man who shirked in the workshop might receive only half his portion. A woman who challenged the matron's word might go to bed hungry. Hunger was a punishment that left no mark on the skin, but carved deep into the spirit. An empty stomach gnawed more sharply than any lash. For many inmates, food was more than sustenance. It was memory. An old farmer, once free on his land, remembered stews simmering in his hearth, thick with turnips, beans, and meat from his own animals. As he swallowed the watery gruel, he could almost taste the broth of his youth, rich and filling. A mother remembered baking bread in her small cottage, the scent filling the room, her children laughing as they waited for the loaf to cool. Now she broke hard crusts with trembling fingers, imagining she could still hear the laughter in the crunch. Children, who had only faint memories of home, clung to stories of apples plucked fresh from orchards, of honey cakes at harvest fairs, of roasted chestnuts sold in the streets at Christmas. These stories became bedtime tales whispered between them, sweeter than the thin meals they ate. Food, even absent, fed the imagination. The kitchen itself was a place of longing. From its doorway drifted the smells of boiling oats, of bread baked in long pans, of broth simmering with bones. The scent filled the corridors, teasing the senses, sharper than the reality of what was served. The cooks, often inmates themselves, chosen for their obedience, worked with little to give. They stretched scraps, watered down broth, divided loaves with precision. And yet they too suffered, for to work with food you could not taste, to stir a pot you could not eat from, was its own form of torment. Hunger was not accidental, it was calculated. The masters believed that well-fed men grew idle, that satisfied bellies bred rebellion. So the portions were measured not to sustain fully, but to sustain just enough. Enough to keep hands working, but not enough to grant strength for defiance. The weak stomach led to weak will, or so the system intended. But hunger had another effect. It bound inmates together, for in their shared emptiness, they recognized one another's humanity. A crust shared secretly between beds meant more than gold. A sip of broth passed from one spoon to another was an act of trust. Hunger pressed hardest on the children. Their small bodies grew slowly, their limbs thin, their eyes large and hollow. They dreamt not of toys or games, but of sweet things, of sugared buns, of warm pies, of milk frothing in a cup. At night, they whispered to one another about the foods they remembered. The simplest apple, the humblest potato, became treasures in their stories. Some children licked their empty bowls clean, searching for the faintest trace of flavor. Others clutched bits of crust in their hands as they slept, unwilling to let go even in dreams. And yet even hunger could not hold its grip forever. As night fell, the pangs dulled. The body, too weak to protest, surrendered to exhaustion. Men lay down on their hard beds, their stomachs aching, their breaths shallow. Women curled against the cold, their arms wrapped around their ribs. Children whispered until sleep carried them into dreams of feasts that would never come. And so the workhouse grew quiet once more. The day's hunger gave way to night's silence. The rules, the punishments, the rations, all faded as eyes closed. Sleep became its own nourishment, a fragile feast for weary souls. Hunger was not just an ache in the belly. It was a rhythm that beat through the entire workhouse. From the toll of the morning bell to the slow extinguishing of lamps at night, hunger was present. Sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, but never absent. It was a companion to every task, every prayer, every weary breath. Before every meal, there was the line. Inmates stood in a single file, bowls in hand, waiting for their turn. The line stretched along cold corridors, shuffling slowly forward. Children fidgeted, lifting their bowls like trophies, their eyes darting toward the kitchen door. Men stared at the floor, silent, conserving their strength. Women held their bowls close as though afraid someone might take them away. The smell of the kitchen drifted outward, thin broth, boiling oats, damp bread. The scent promised more than it gave, but it was enough to make mouths water and stomachs twist. The line moved inch by inch, until finally a ladle scraped the bottom of a pot, pouring its contents into the waiting bowls. And then as quickly as it began, the meal was over. Bread was the most coveted thing in the workhouse. It was heavy in the hand, coarse in texture, baked in large loaves and cut into careful slices. No butter, no jam, only dry crumb. Yet even in its plainness, it was more satisfying than gruel. Children sometimes hid pieces beneath their clothing, sneaking them back to the sleeping wards to nibble in secret. But if caught, the punishment was swift. Bread withheld for the next day, or worse. A man might trade his bread crust for a favor in the workshop. A child might swap hers for a whispered story. Bread was more than food. It was currency, precious and fragile. The act of eating in the workhouse was stripped of comfort. No tablecloths, no chatter, No shared bowls passed between friends. Instead, each inmate ate quickly, hunched over, spoon clinking against bowl. The meals were short, often less than 15 minutes, after which the bowls were collected and scrubbed. And yet, within that short time, the mind wandered. A spoonful of gruel could carry a man back to his childhood home, where his mother stirred porridge thickened with cream. A hard crust of bread could make a woman remember Sunday dinners with family, laughter spilling as freely as gravy on a plate. The workhouse took away luxury, but memory could not be erased. What struck most inmates was not just the smallness of the portions, but the absence of taste. Salt was rare, sugar rarer still. Meat, when it appeared, was gristly and bland. Vegetables were boiled until their flavors dissolved into the water. It was food designed not for pleasure, but for control. The masters believed that to give inmates good meals was to spoil them, to make poverty appear comfortable. Instead, meals were carefully calculated, enough to keep the body upright, not enough to stir joy. Taste itself became a memory, not a daily experience. Among children, hunger was a constant game of strategy. They learned to scrape every last grain from the bottom of their bowls. Some tilted their bowls toward the light, peering inside as if a hidden treasure might appear. Others pressed their spoons against the surface, licking them long after the food was gone. At night, they invented imaginary feasts. One child described a great roast goose, golden and fat, carried to the table with apples stuffed in its sides. Another whispered of cakes dusted with sugar, stacked high like towers. The other children listened wide-eyed, chewing their dry crusts as though the stories made them sweeter. Our hunger for them was not just physical, it was imaginative. They learned to feed on dreams. Those who worked in the kitchen bore a strange burden. They stirred pots of gruel, divided loaves of bread, ladled broth into bowls, all while their own stomachs growled. For they too were inmates, bound by the same rations, the same silence. Some tried to be kind, pressing a little more porridge into a child's bowl when no overseer was watching. Others grew bitter, their ladles striking hard against the bowls, resenting the cries for more. The kitchen was a place of both hope and cruelty. Every meal passed through it, every hunger returned to it. It was the heart of the workhouse, and yet it was a heart that beat cold. After meals, inmates returned to labor. Men carved wood, broke stones, or picked oakum, fibers torn from old ropes, their fingers bleeding as they worked. Women sewed coarse garments, scrubbed endless floors, or washed laundry until their hands cracked. Children were set to lighter tasks, though no less tiring, sorting rags, carrying water, sweeping corridors. All of it was done on empty stomachs. The masters believed that hunger sharpened effort, but more often it dulled it. Work was slow, weary, heavy. Every movement cost energy, every hour stretched long. Hunger drained more than the body. It drained the will. Yet even within hunger, sparks of resistance flickered. There were whispered stories of men who smuggled scraps from the workshop, roasted chestnuts hidden in pockets. Of women who stitched extra thread into their garments and traded it for stolen bread. Of children who gathered potato peelings thrown away by the kitchen, chewing them as if they were delicacies. Small rebellions, small victories. They did not end hunger, but they softened it. For even in silence, even in fear, hunger created bonds. The sharing of food was an act of defiance and an act of love. At night, hunger returned strongest. Lying on hard mattresses, inmates felt their stomachs echo with emptiness. The thin blankets did little to comfort. Some rocked themselves to sleep. Others pressed their hands to their bellies, trying to quiet the growls. The sound of hunger filled the dormitories. The sigh of men, the soft whimper of women, the faint sobs of children who could not sleep. And yet slowly exhaustion won. Dreams came, carrying visions of banquets, of warm kitchens, of overflowing tables. In sleep, hunger softened, replaced by the illusion of fullness. But when the morning bell rang, the ache was waiting again. In time, hunger became part of identity. The inmates no longer thought of themselves as men and women of work or craft, but as bodies driven by emptiness. Hunger shaped their posture, their speech, their thoughts. It was the lens through which they viewed the world, and still they endured. For hunger, though sharp, was not final. It pressed down, it weakened, but it did not always break. The will to survive, the faint taste of bread, the memory of better meals, all kept the spirit alive, even in the cold heart of the workhouse. And so, another day ended, and another began. Always with hunger, always with silence, always with the faintest thread of hope. The workhouse did not only dictate what inmates ate, it dictated what they wore. The clothes of the poor, once patched and worn from a life outside, were taken away upon entry. In their place, a uniform was issued, simple, coarse, and deliberately plain. The uniform was more than fabric. It was a statement, a symbol. It told the world and the wearer themselves that they belonged not to themselves, but to the institution. Upon entering the workhouse, each man, woman, and child was stripped of their own garments. Shoes, shawls, coats, even small tokens tucked away in pockets. All were taken, cataloged, and stored. Sometimes these items were lost forever, sold or discarded. Other times they remained locked away until the day the inmate left, though many never did. This ritual marked the beginning of transformation. To lose one's clothes was to lose a piece of identity. A mother's dress, sewn with care, a father's boots, worn from years of work, a child's knitted scarf. Each spoke of life outside, and now those voices were silenced. Men were given jackets and trousers of coarse fabric, often made of strong wool or hemp. The colors were muted, drab gray, dull brown, or faded blue. No patterns, no decoration. The cut was stiff, designed not for comfort and labor, yet lighter with each wash until it thinned and frayed. Boots were thick, often second-hand, their soles hard and unforgiving. Many men worked long hours with blistered feet, the leather never softening, the fit never quite right. To wear the uniform was to carry weight, not just physical, but symbolic. It reminded every man that he was no longer a tradesman, no longer a farmer, no longer his own master. He was a workhouse inmate. For women, the uniform was equally stark. They received plain gowns of coarse cotton or wool, cut loose and shapeless. Aprons were tied around their waists, stiff and white when new, quickly stained from endless labor. Shawls were thin, barely enough to keep out the drafts that crept through the corridors. Bonnets were issued to cover their hair, hiding individuality, flattening style. The bonnet was not a thing of beauty, but of control. To wear it was to show submission, modesty, and anonymity. Shoes were heavy and often ill-fitted, rubbing raw at the ankles. Many women worked long hours bent over washboards or sewing benches, their feet aching, their backs unprotected from cold air seeping through thin dresses. The uniform made every woman look the same, faceless, voiceless, an echo of the one beside her. Children, too, were uniformed. Boys wore short jackets and trousers, plain shirts and rough stockings. Girls were given simple frocks, pinafores, and caps that concealed their hair. Colors were muted, fabrics coarse. There were no ribbons, no lace, no cheerful patterns. Childhood was stripped of its brightness. A child might look at their reflection in a wash basin and see not themselves, but a smaller version of the workhouse machine. Even in play, when such moments were allowed, the uniforms marked them as different from children outside the walls. If a passerby glimpsed them in the yard, they would know instantly. These were pauper children. These were the workhouse poor. The uniform served a purpose. It erased individuality. In the eyes of the workhouse masters, poverty was not to be dignified. If inmates dressed well or even comfortably, it might appear that the workhouse was too generous, and so the clothes were designed to be plain, uncomfortable, and unmistakable. Uniforms made the poor visible, marked, and categorized. If an inmate ever walked beyond the gates in their issued garments, the outside world would know immediately who they were. There was no hiding, no blending in. It was not just fabric, It was stigma, stitched into every seam. Those who wore the uniforms remembered the feel. The scratch of wool against bare skin. The way sweat clung to fabric and never seemed to wash out. The way the garments grew heavier when wet, offering no protection against cold winds or icy rain. Some spoke of the constant itch, the irritation of seams that rubbed against the body with every movement. Others recalled the faint, sour smell that lingered, even after laundering. There was no softness, no comfort. The uniform was a daily reminder of the hardness of life within the workhouse walls. Clothes were mended over and over again. Women inmates were often tasked with repairing the uniforms, stitching worn seams, patching holes, darning socks. They worked with thread as coarse as the fabric, their needles pulling tight against frayed edges. Yet even with repairs, the garments sagged and tore. Patches upon patches created stiff ridges, rubbing against skin. Socks sprouted holes faster than they could be mended, leaving toes exposed to the cold. Each repair told a story, not of care but of necessity. The uniform endured just as its wearer endured. On Sundays, there was a faint echo of dignity. Inmates were sometimes given slightly cleaner clothes for chapel, a Sunday best. Yet even these garments were far from fine. They were simply less stained, less torn. Men buttoned their jackets carefully. Women smoothed their aprons, tied their shawls more tightly. Children stood straighter in their frocks. It was a fragile moment, a shadow of respectability. And yet, even in these moments, the clothes reminded them where they were. For many inmates, the uniform was not just about what they wore, it was about what they no longer had. A man who once wore the apron of a blacksmith, heavy with soot and pride, now wore the drab jacket of the workhouse. A woman who once had a dress sewn by her mother, now wore a shapeless gown, indistinguishable from the one beside her. A child who once played in patched but colorful clothes now stood in plain frocks, looking like every other child in the ward. The uniform was the final blow to identity. Hunger might weaken the body, labor might exhaust it, but the uniform declared, silently and firmly, you are no longer yourself. You belong to the workhouse. And so the days passed, one coarse sleeve after another, one heavy boot after the next. Clothes worn thin, patched again, never replaced with comfort or beauty. In silence, they bore the fabric. In silence, they carried its weight. And the workhouse marched on, its halls filled with people dressed the same, not by choice, but by command. As we come to the end of tonight's journey through the echoing corridors of the Victorian Workhouse, I want to take a gentle pause, to simply say thank you. Truly, thank you for choosing to spend these quiet hours here with me. Out of all the places you could be, all the stories you could listen to, you've chosen to be here, winding down the day, letting the past speak softly as you rest. That means more than words can say. I know that when you press play on one of these long sleep stories, you're not just looking for history or for facts. You're searching for something deeper, comfort, calm, a sense of being carried away from the noise of the present. And I want you to know, that's exactly why I create these episodes. They are made for you, for the dreamer who wants to drift into another time, for the curious soul who wants to feel history rather than memorize it, and for anyone who simply needs a little peace at the end of a long day. This story of the workhouse has been heavy at times, hasn't it? The silence, the meager meals, the strict divisions, the uniforms that erased individuality. And yet, through it all, I hope it reminded you of the resilience of human beings. Even when stripped of so much, people endured. They found ways to survive, to dream, even within walls that tried to take away hope. And perhaps there's a quiet lesson there for us as we rest tonight. Even in hardship, there is endurance. And even in the darkest halls, there can still be whispers of humanity. But before I let you drift fully into sleep, I'd like to reach out to you directly, almost as if we're sitting by the glow of a lantern together. You listening right now? Yes, you. I'd love to hear from you. What kind of story would you like to hear next? Which corner of history? Which myth? Which forgotten life would you like me to bring to your bedside? Would you like more tales of the Victorians, their strange customs, their inventions, their hidden tragedies? Or maybe you'd prefer to travel even further back to the mysteries of ancient Egypt, the battles of Rome, or the myths of Greece. Perhaps you want something closer to our own time, untold moments from the 20th century, the what-ifs of modern history, or the quiet lives of ordinary people who shaped the world in small ways. Every episode I create with you in mind. Your comments, your messages, your thoughts, they guide me. They tell me what sparks your imagination, what helps you fall asleep with curiosity instead of worry. So please don't be shy. Let me know. Write down in the comments what you would love to drift off to next. Do you want more what-if scenarios, like our exploration of Lincoln's life? Do you want more immersive journeys through daily life, like tonight's step into the workhouse? Or perhaps you'd like something mythical and dreamlike, where gods and heroes brush against the human world. I can't promise I'll create every single request, but I can promise I'll listen. Because this isn't just my channel, it's our space. A little corner of the internet where history, imagination, and rest come together. And your voice matters here. So as you lay your head down tonight, let me leave you with this thought. History is endless. The past is vast and full of stories, millions of voices, countless forgotten moments, all waiting to be rediscovered. We will never run out of things to explore together. This episode was just one doorway among many, and already the next doors are waiting for us to open them. But for now, I invite you to rest. Breathe deeply. Let the story settle into your mind like a fading candlelight. You don't need to hold on to every detail. You don't need to remember every fact. All you need to carry with you is the gentle rhythm of history, the sense of having traveled far without leaving your bed, the comfort of knowing you are not alone in your curiosity. So thank you truly for listening. Thank you for being here, for supporting this channel, for giving me the chance to share these long, winding stories. Every view, every comment, every like, it keeps this dream alive. And it reminds me that these hours of storytelling are not just whispers into the dark, but connections made with real people all across the world. Whether you're listening from a small town, a bustling city, or somewhere in between, know that you're part of this journey. You are part of this growing community of dreamers and seekers, and together we'll keep exploring. I'll leave you now to drift, to dream, to rest. But before you close your eyes fully, take just one moment to imagine what you'd like to hear next time. Let that thought drift into the comments when you wake. I'll be waiting there, eager to see where your imagination takes us. Until then, good night, rest well, and may history carry you gently into sleep.